Hello and welcome to The Brief. I'm Jafar Hasnan. The coronavirus pandemic continues to wreak havoc across the globe. Although international flights have started to resume, the world was put in a total pause a few weeks ago as inter-country travels were restricted. Now, this situation led to chaos where many foreign nationals were stranded abroad as they could not buy tickets to go home. However, governments worldwide facilitated their nationals to be repatriated here in Turkey. The Embassy of Pakistan in Ankara also helped Pakistanis return to their homes. We spoke about this with Mr. Mohammad Syrus Sajjad Qazi, Pakistan's ambassador to Turkey, to discuss this further along with regional issues including India-China tensions and the Kashmir issue. We asked him how the Pakistani government looks at the military conflict between the two nuclear-armed countries as their neighbor, and we also asked him what the international community must do to ease the pain of Kashmiris living under Indian occupation, especially during this COVID-19 pandemic. So without any further delay, I will leave you with this exclusive interview I conducted with the ambassador of Pakistan to Turkey. Your Excellency, Mohammad Syrus Sajjad Qazi, the ambassador of Pakistan to Turkey, thank you very much for joining us on A News. Let me start by asking you, we all are in the midst of a pandemic, something unprecedented, something we have never seen before. Now, many foreign nationals from different countries are stranded in many different countries across the world, including Pakistani nationals. Now, I was going through the Twitter account of Prime Minister Imran Khan, in which he tweeted about the repatriation of stranded Pakistanis from countries such as Turkey. Now, please help us understand, how did your embassy help stranded Pakistanis here in Turkey, in particular cities such as Istanbul, and what other facilities did you provide to the Pakistani nationals here in Turkey?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jafar Saab. This is a very, very pertinent and important question. Yes, you are absolutely right. We are living through not once in a lifetime event. We are probably living through not even a once in a generation event. We are living through once in a centuries event. The world has not seen anything like this since the Spanish flu epidemic of 100 years ago. And I sincerely hope that the world does not have to live through another incident like this. It posed enormous challenges to all aspects of life, including diplomacy. To give you an illustration of, and you're very right in saying, talking about the stranded Pakistanis, mashallah, Pakistanis can be found all over the world. Many were out traveling, many were out earning their livelihood in foreign countries. When the full impact of this pandemic struck, and Turkey was no exception. In fact, Turkey is more important in a way that it is a conduit for people visiting the world, because we have a code-share agreement. I mean, the PIA, Pakistan International Airlines, and Turkish Airlines have a code-share agreement through which Turkish Airlines, in fact, picks up passengers from Pakistan and then ferries them across the world. So when this pandemic hit and the global flight disruptions took place, a very large number of Pakistanis found them stranded all over the world, including in Istanbul, some of them actually in the transit lounge. So we had to rush, go and help them. It was a very unusual circumstance. Neither Turkey knew what to do with such a large number of people caught in the transit lounge, caught in transit. It was a very tough couple of days. We were able, thanks to Turkish assistance, extricate our nationals from the transit lounge. Turkey was very kind to provide them quarantine facilities. They were quarantined closed, in fact, in Bolu. And once their tests came negative and the quarantine was over, then the embassy moved them to various hotels, accommodations, so that until the flights resume, or we could arrange a special flight for them, they were literally, so to speak, guests of Turkey and guests of the government of Pakistan. This is one small illustration of the myriad challenges that this pandemic posed to the embassy. A number of Pakistanis working in Turkey unfortunately lost their livelihood. Some lost their accommodations. We had to arrange alternate accommodations for them until the flights could be arranged. Some were in need of financial or other food assistance that we provided, in addition to help from our ordinary Turkish citizens and organizations and NGOs also. So it was a very good example also of the solidarity and brotherhood that exists between the two countries. Then there are about 2,000 plus Pakistani students in Turkey. They confronted unique challenges of their own. They were confined to their dorm. Some needed medical assistance. Some had medical emergencies back home and they had to go to Pakistan rather urgently. Their dorms were being closed, things like that. So it was all in all, a very busy 3 months. I would not be exaggerating if in this 3 months, the two missions, Pakistan Consulate General in Istanbul and the Pakistan Embassy in Ankara, probably fielded close to 20,000 telephone calls, WhatsApp messages, and emails. This does not seem like a very large number, but I tell you, try to divide it on the number of officers and officials that we have. It's a very significant. We have some officers who probably have not had a good night's sleep in the last 3 months. But mashallah, we were able to come through, if not with flying colors, with reasonable enough performance. We were able to organize 3 flights. About 800 Pakistanis were repatriated in these flights. The last one took place only a few days back. The load, insofar as Turkey is concerned, is now over. We were also able to arrange a flight from the northern Cyprus to Pakistan also, because there are a number of Pakistani students and Pakistanis who work there. We were of course throughout in this endeavor guided by the directions of our Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister to place the convenience, comfort, safety, security of our Pakistani nationals abroad foremost. We have tried to do that. We have a number of very glowing testimonials once these Pakistani passengers reached home. Some sent us very moving, heart touching messages appreciating the embassy and the mission's performance. Of course, there was also very frustrating time. The community sometimes lost patience with the embassy. They were right. Unfortunately, embassy could not do anything at that time. But the basic thing is we remained in touch with our community, and in the end, we were able to resolve most of their complaints.
Absolutely. Mr. Ambassador, you have a vast diplomatic experience. You have served in various diplomatic missions across the world. Please tell me how unprecedented this situation was for you as an ambassador, so that our audience understands what kind of difficulties embassies and consulates across the world are facing.
Well, as I said, it's a pandemic. And its impact was also felt on all aspects of life. Diplomacy is just one part. The governments are confronting it, the economies, the tourism sector, for instance, in Turkey, everything was impacted. To give you some small insights, for instance, while this load of dealing with our nationals' difficulties and problems fell on the embassy and the consulate, it was exactly at the same time that we had actually to physically close the embassy and the consulate, finding ways and means to remain in touch with our nationals, with other people also, and providing them all manner of assistance that we could, while at the same time somehow being physically distanced from them, reducing the embassy working hours to on a skeletal. These are very serious challenges. Officers transformed their residences into offices. The cell phone became the main medium of communication and work. So it was quite difficult. At the same time, there were so many things that normal course of events, people need assistance, documents need to be attested, various business agreements, etc., have to be testimonials need to be attested, passports need to be issued, Kimliks need to be taken care of, background documentation needs to be provided. This had to be done in a manner that, well, there was some inconvenience and there was some disruption, but still it had to continue. This was one aspect of it. Then also providing assistance to Pakistanis physically. Some needed money, some needed food assistance, some needed accommodation. Somebody actually had to go out and get accommodations for them. To give you a small illustration, at the very height of the pandemic impact, almost 80-90% of hotels and big and small hotels were closed down. But there were Pakistanis who were stranded here, who had no means of feeding themselves in terms of cooking for themselves. They had lost their accommodations. We had to find accommodations. Our consulate general in Istanbul, for instance, became quite adept as a mini realtor, finding places, small restaurants or small hotels to open, requesting them to open up, complying with Turkish health authorities restrictions, but at the same time being available, then accommodating our passengers until they were able to take the flight home temporarily in those areas. The Turkish government stepped in. We requested them for some accommodation. They provided some accommodation in some of the quarantine centers all through. So it was an effort by the embassy, of course, but we could not very frankly have performed this anywhere near to the measure that we did without the understanding, assistance, brotherhood, love, affection of our Turkish brothers, from government down to ordinary Turkish citizens. I would specifically like to extend our appreciation to His Excellency, the Honorable Ali Shaheen, who is a member of the Turkish Parliament from Gaziantep and is the chairman of the Turkish Pakistan Friendship Association, Friendship Group in the Parliament. He was instrumental in facilitating in dealing with these problems. Indirectly exhibited a great understanding and accommodation of the difficulties that Pakistanis were facing on account of the COVID crisis in Turkey.
Of course, this is just another example of the brotherly relationship between Turkey and Pakistan. Now, Mr. Ambassador, before we move on to the next part of the interview, please tell us, when can we expect normal flights to resume between Turkey and Pakistan? Many Turkish nationals and many Pakistani nationals are wondering also, do you have a message for the Pakistani community living here in Turkey?
Well, in terms of flights, we hope the sooner the better. Of course, there are so many considerations guiding that decision, which unfortunately are not within the purview of the embassy. But Turkish Airlines, I think, has tentatively scheduled a flight from I think 2nd of July. Flights are operating to Pakistan on a limited frequency basis. We hope the sooner it happens, the better it is. And until that happens, my message, and when I say our message, I mean the teams from the Ankara Embassy and the Consulate General in Istanbul to our nationals, and this has been our consistent message throughout to our nationals here, is to, number one, take care of themselves, abide by all the safety and security regulations of the Turkish government and Turkish municipalities and their universities if they are students. At the same time, we are there for you. If you need any assistance, our phone numbers are available on our websites. The officers, we have helplines. There is always somebody manning the telephone lines 24/7. We are available. Let us know. We will do our best to help you. And if you feel that there is some delay in dealing with your problem, believe me, it is not on account of intention. It is perhaps on account of capacity, but you will be tended to and you will be taken care of.
All right, Mr. Ambassador, now let's move on to the next part of the interview. As you know, recently, tensions dramatically escalated between India and China. Please tell me, how is Pakistan looking at all these latest developments? What is the Pakistani reaction?
Well, very frankly, it is never a good idea for two countries to be in a tense relationship or in a tense standoff. It is even a worse idea for two very big countries, such as India and China, to be in the situation that we see them to be in right now. And it is absolutely a terrible idea if the two countries involved are also nuclear powers. Unfortunately, there is a dynamic underway in the Indian politics in India that has brought South Asia to this this very serious cliff or precipice twice in a little over 1.5 years. You will recall the very tense standoff between Pakistan and India that was instigated by the Indian strikes on Pakistan in February 2019. For a while, there were very serious apprehensions of the situation spinning out of control. And now, unfortunately, India seems to have engineered a similar situation with China. The common denominator, unfortunately, in these developments is India, and the mindset in India, and particularly the mindset of the ruling leadership, the leadership in India right now, guided by the Hindutva superiority complex that they seem to have, and this fondness for their doctrine of muscular foreign policy. This muscular foreign policy backfired very seriously in February 2019, and this muscular foreign policy has backfired very seriously recently in the last few weeks also. The move for the way forward, what Pakistan wants to see and would like to see is for sanity and saner heads to prevail. The region is home to a fifth of humanity. It cannot afford such cavalier diplomacy and lack of diplomacy. Countries in the region need to sit down, listen to each other, address each other's core concerns, and move on forward, give diplomacy a chance. Unfortunately, what we see in the region is an exact reverse of this. Contrary to this, just to give you a short illustration, a couple of days back, I think yesterday probably, the Indian government has informed the Pakistan government that it intends to reduce the size of Pakistan mission in Delhi. And we have been unfortunately forced to do the same then as reciprocity for the Indian mission, just when the world in the midst of a pandemic needs to be focusing on constructive engagement of ways of dealing with, of common ways of dealing with common challenges. This is not the way forward. However, the Indian government, in its considered opinion, has chosen to turn its back on diplomacy. It is doing it nobody a favor, least of all to itself and to the people of India. This is the time for sitting down, having a conversation, and moving forward. And we hope that Indian leadership will review their view of the situation and things in South Asia, and draw the right lessons from what has been happening in South Asia since they came into power, particularly after they were re-elected.
Mr. Ambassador, I have been following the region for the past couple of years, and this is what I wonder. Do you think India is becoming increasingly hostile towards all its neighbors, from Pakistan to Nepal to China to even Bangladesh, with regards to the Rohingya refugees? Why is that? What is India trying to achieve here? What is the end game for India? And let me add one more question here. Recently, the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Mr. Shah Mahmood Qureshi, warned India against a false flag operation. Why would India execute a false flag operation? Please help us understand.
Well, coming to the first part of your question about India as a neighbor, I would not like to gainsay about other countries. They probably illuminate you more on a neighbor. But India has been not an easy neighbor for Pakistan since the day Pakistan was created. If it is worthwhile going back, the day Pakistan was created, Indian leadership predicted the country's demise and left no stone unturned to make that prediction a reality. They refused to share our just share of assets. They closed down our waters. We were an agrarian country. We still are an agrarian country. They shut down our waters, threatening to turn Pakistan into a desert. They inflicted on the day, in fact, even weeks prior to when the two countries were born out of British India, they inflicted this congenital wound on the Kashmiris, on Pakistan, on India itself, and on South Asia of the Kashmir dispute, going against the formula according to which various princely states were supposed to accede either to India or to Pakistan, all norms in that regard. So we have never found India to be an easy or even a reasonable neighbor. We are prepared to do everything to make India have a second look at its approach because it has yielded nothing to India and it has certainly deprived South Asia of peace and stability. It has deprived hundreds of thousands of Kashmiris of their lives and millions of Kashmiris of their fundamental rights. And it has deprived Pakistan of also an opportunity to focus on the challenges that countries like Pakistan, India need to be focusing on: poverty, underdevelopment, illiteracy, and right now the COVID-19 pandemic. So we urge India to have a look again at at the manner in which it behaves in the region. We have no interest to wish the people of India all prosperity and peace, but it needs to review its own approach towards its neighbors. And as the biggest country in the region, I would say that it has a bigger contribution to make to peace and security if it only were to review its approach towards its neighbors who want nothing more than the best of relations with it. All we seek is sovereign equality, respect for each other, and a honest discussion of the differences and an honest effort to resolve them according to international law. Now coming to the foreign minister's point of view, in fact, very clear and I think very eminently correct assertion of a possible Indian false flag operation. It is in the nature of thing that nature of power that such things happen. If you have lost prestige and honor in one area or sphere, as unfortunately India seems to have suffered a setback in the Ladakh area right now, as it is right now confronting a very, very deeply rooted dislike and what would you say, opposition, resistance to Kashmir, in Kashmir. It is in the nature of things that countries like India, particularly when they have convinced themselves of being able to foreign policy, to seek distractions. Honor and prestige lost in one battlefield need to be recovered in another relatively easier battlefield. And they probably perceive Pakistan to be an easier prospect, given that there's a disparity of size between the two of 1:8. But again, it's also a cul-de-sac in the sense that India has already tried that last February and has realized the mistake that it made and that it is not so easy browbeating neighbors. But nevertheless, the temptation is there. The COVID-19 crisis seems to be galloping out of control. The insurgency in Kashmir continues. The dislike of Indian oppression and repression in Kashmir is still there. The shenanigans, the constitutional shenanigans that have been perpetrated and orchestrated in Indian occupied Kashmir since August 2019 have only added to the determination of the Kashmiris to not relent in seeking their right of self-determination. The Ladakh situation has not been very feather in the cap of the Modi government. So what do you do in such situations when people are questioning you around and there's only one option, and that is to try to divert attention, and that diversion can only unfortunately come from perhaps Kashmir, and then trying to orchestrate something and choreograph something against Pakistan. We would advise against it. The way is to actually sit back, take a dispassionate view of what is happening, where you have gone wrong. This muscular foreign policy has brought nothing but instability to the region and to the Indians also. So let us sit down, have a conversation, address these long-standing issues and move on. But we are vigilant, as our Prime Minister and our Foreign Minister has repeatedly stated. We hope that India will not fall to the temptation of conducting or going that way, but we are prepared, reluctantly, but we are prepared.
I was coming to that actually, Ambassador Qazi. Now, as you know, the Indian-occupied Kashmir has been under a lockdown since August of last year, and now the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated the situation in the Indian-occupied Kashmir. On a daily basis, innocent Kashmiris are killed, innocent Kashmiris are put in jails. Please tell us, what does the international community need to do to help ease the pain of Kashmiris? And most importantly, what do Muslim nations need to do for Kashmir?
Thank you very much. Again, this is a very relevant question. Right now, if you look at what's happening, when there is a crisis, the burden of every crisis falls on the most vulnerable people. And if you were to draw up a list of the most vulnerable people in the world, those under foreign occupation are at the lowest rung of even amongst those who are vulnerable. Right now, as the world confronts the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, the burden of it, of course, falls on the poor, the indigent most. And even more so, it falls on those who are under foreign occupation. And Kashmir is a very correct illustration of that. They are already languishing under foreign occupation. They are already in a lockdown. They are already under siege. There are 700,000 plus Indian occupation troops who have their knee on the neck of the Kashmiris. Their access to the world, I mean the Kashmiris' access to the world, is deeply circumscribed when it is not prohibited. Dealing with a situation such as a pandemic requires that you have the full information. If you are falling ill, where can you go? How can you go there? Which hospital is providing you the facilities? Where ventilators are available? Things like that. If you have no communication with the world, and if you have no communication with each other, which is a fact and which is the case in Indian occupied Kashmir, how do you deal with it? I would rather say that unfortunately, Kashmiris are suffering from a double jeopardy. The double jeopardy is that, of course, they are dealing with the law of force, the nature of force that the Indian state has unleashed on them. And now they are also having to deal with the force of nature, which is the pandemic itself. And these do not add to each other, these actually multiply each other. The international community needs to step up and tell India to let up. There are a number of calls on India from Pakistan, the OIC, some parliamentarians from the world, some citizens of the world who have a sense of fair play, to asking India to let up. This is not the time to increase your oppression and repression. This is a time to help Kashmiris deal with this COVID, because it is a challenge for everybody, not just the Kashmiris. But the Kashmiris have a double jeopardy and a double burden of dealing with it. The international community very clearly needs to tell India to abide. Number one, ease the humanitarian crisis. Number two, uphold the fundamental rights of the Kashmiris. And number three, and most important, to uphold the right of self-determination of the Kashmiris, which was pledged to them by Pakistan, by India, and by the United Nations Security Council, speaking for all of us. And when I say all of us, speaking for the entire international community. For 70 years have passed, this issue has not gone away, this issue has not weakened, this issue has not diluted. And 70 more years will continue. There is no reason for this agony of the Kashmiris, of Pakistanis, and of the Indians in South Asia to continue, because of just this love for a muscular foreign policy. The solution is very sensible and imminent. And Pakistan and India, as two democracies, should have no reason not to agree to it. Just ask the Kashmiris what they want through the democratic method of a UN-administered plebiscite. How can a democracy say no to that? In terms of what you said about what the international community can do to assist the Kashmiris, well, the best example comes from the country where I am sitting right now. Turkey has been very forthright in upholding the call for fundamental rights of the Kashmiris, of also calling for a meaningful dialogue between Pakistan and India to resolve this issue, of reducing tension in the region, and also of offering its mediation and mediatory services in case this is needed. And Pakistan eminently welcomes that, to deal with this issue and rid the world of the longest-standing Security Council resolutions. We are deeply thankful to Turkish leadership, Turkish institutions, and ordinary Turks for standing by the people of Kashmir in their just struggle for the right of self-determination.
Now, Mr. Ambassador, my last question to you here. Recently, India has violated international law and disregarded all United Nations Security Council resolutions by revoking Article 370 in Kashmir, which makes me wonder, is India bringing the Israeli model to Kashmir?
All occupation powers down the history have always tried all manner of tricks to convince themselves and convince the world that the territory that they are occupying is an integral part of that country. If you recall, in the closing chapters of the 500-year-long colonialism saga, there were some European metropolitan countries who, to hang on to their to colonies, tried to pass them off as integration, as part of the metropole. Algeria was one, Mozambique was another. But these are all fictions. The world can see this fiction. And in fact, the irony of it is that you yourself can see this fiction. You are just not ready to admit it to yourself. Yes, India has abrogated Article 370. It has gone on further to now come up with domiciliary laws, etc., allowing the demographic bomb to also impact on the Kashmiris in addition to the occupation bomb and the COVID-19 bomb. But the right of self-determination and love for freedom is something that the more you oppress, the more it becomes stronger. And Kashmir is an eminent example of that. And the Palestinians' drive for their own right of self-determination is another example of it. The more you apply pressure to it, the more it hardens, the more deeper roots within the consciousness of the people it acquires. So this is a very self-defeating approach. The basic solution, as I just said while responding to your last question, is just ask them, what's so hard about it? It's a democracy. You're saying that you're the world's biggest democracy. Just ask the Kashmiris what they want. And the agony of the Kashmiris and the South Asians. At the same time, the international community, for instance, the United Nations Security Council has deliberated on the Kashmir issue in the last twice in the last 1 year or so. Only a few days back, there was an emergency meeting of the OIC, a contact group on Kashmir, held in which a number of very strong comments were made and a number of calls were made on India to move on, to reduce the humanitarian crisis, to uphold the fundamental rights of the Kashmir, and also allow to rescind its unilateral and illegal actions of the last 1.5 years. The thing is that the international community needs to keep on pressing on India to act like the democracy that it pretends and give the Kashmiris the rights that it itself promised. It is not a big deal. You have already done it. Your founding Prime Minister Nehru, is on record at least, I think, 12 times in very unequivocal terms that we have made a promise to Kashmiris. India is a great nation and great nations do not go back on their word. Please prove him right, and please prove us wrong on that count.
Your Excellency, Ambassador Mohammad Syrus Sajjad Qazi, thank you very much for talking to us on A News. We really appreciate your analysis. Please stay safe. Thank you very much once again.